Welcome to this talk tonight on basic income, an idea whose time has come. This event has been organized by the local Basic Income Initiative here in Leipzig, Germany, and we are a citizens group with the aim of promoting the idea of a basic income. We want to make more people aware of the concept and want to discuss it with as many people as possible. You know, I'm going to talk about an idea tonight which at first seems highly unrealistic and very absurd, which just challenges our view of society and of other things. So this whole thing, you can only get money if you give something in exchange for it, is just turned upside down, I know. But let me just ask you a question. What would you do if you had a basic income? If you didn't have to worry about the money for your basic needs? What would be different for you? What would that change for you? Now, think about your friends, your family. What would be different for them? What would be different for us all? About dreams and visions. Well, why should we talk about new ideas? Why should we talk about ideas that seem to be unrealistic and absurd? Well, why should we have dreams and visions? Because there have always been dreams and visions. Let's look back for a second. For example, traveling around the globe. Why could Christopher Columbus go west? Why could he go west at a time when most of the people were saying, "You're crazy, you can't do that"? Why could he do it anyway? Because he had that dream, he had that vision. He could imagine that it might be possible. And this is true for so many things. In fact, most of the things we have today used to be just a dream or vision in the past. Look at this guy, for example. He was not very likely to be successful. But why did he even try? Because again, he had such a vision. And today, traveling by plane is absolutely normal to us. And this applies to politics and society as well. For example, bringing down kings and dictatorship, as you can see here in the French Revolution. Or the establishment of political parties, free elections. Again, that used to be just a dream in the past. And what I want to show with the last picture is that sometimes even great changes happen very quickly and surprisingly. Like the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Iron Curtain. But where's the connection to basic income here? Well, maybe basic income is one of those crazy ideas. One of those ideas that are just a dream, but at some point become a reality. So, what is a basic income? Before I start, I would like to show you a couple of words you may also find in the debate. What I call basic income is sometimes also called citizens' dividend, living allowance, guaranteed minimum income, or citizens' income. But what is a basic income? A basic income is a payment of money to all members of a community, like a state or country. So it's paid from the community for the citizens of that community. And this payment has to meet 4 criteria. Well, what I'm using here is the definition of the German basic income network. There are other definitions out there as well, but most of them are quite similar, so I'll go for that one. The first point is, it's paid individually. So it's not paid to families, nor is it paid to households. It is just paid to the individual person. The only exception to this might be the children, where the parents receive it on behalf of their children. The second point is, it covers the basic cost of living. So the basic income needs to be high enough. It needs to be high enough to cover all your existential needs, like food, housing, medical care, and a minimum of social and cultural participation, so that the basic income allows a decent life even without any additional income. The third point is there's no means testing. Means testing means that there's an authority checking your financial status and so on. So you go and you have to see people employed by the state, and they check if you're allowed to get something or not. And all of this just goes away. There's no means testing. And the last point is there's no work requirement. So you don't have to accept any job offers in return. It's truly an unconditional basic income. And what we have here is a model with an income that everyone gets. So everyone gets the same amount as a base, and everything you then earn, you earn in addition. So the basic income is not taken away in that case. All right, when hearing this, you might say, well, this is extreme, this is so radical. So what kind of people have such ideas? Well, let me show you. The first time people had such ideas was in the Age of Enlightenment, so in the 17th and 18th century. It was also an age in which the idea of human rights became popular. So the idea that just because you are a human being, you have certain rights. And also at that time, the concept of natural law became popular. So the concept that there are certain laws that don't come from a king or any ruler, but that just come from nature, or even from human nature. And it was in this way of thinking that people said, well, the initial state of the world is that there's enough income for everybody. The initial state is that nature itself provides enough income in form of resources, in form of land, plants and animals, rivers, forests, and so on. And they suggested that when these resources that should belong to everybody are not accessible anymore, then there needs to be a compensation. For example, when a king takes possession of the land and doesn't allow hunting or farming, then there needs to be a compensation. Today we would call this privatization. So someone uses land or resources for his own interest, for his private profits, then there should be a compensation. And one man who suggested something like this was Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was one of the founding fathers of the United States, who also helped a lot to popularize the idea of human rights. And he suggested to use such a compensation, for example, that comes through taxation of the land, to provide a basic income for all. But there's also a different approach to the topic, which I want to call a question of justice. Martin Luther King, and many people don't know that, was also a supporter of basic income. When he lived, he analyzed the society he lived in, and he criticized. He criticized that, on the one hand, there's so much wealth, abundance of goods and prosperity, whereas on the other hand, there's still poverty. Existential poverty right in the middle of our society. How can that be? And he claimed that when productivity is so high, then poverty is not an economic issue anymore, but just a political one. Then poverty is just a question of distribution. And his criticism was that politicians so far have always tried to solve poverty by first solving something else. And instead of this indirect way, he suggested, just do it directly. Give the assistance, give the benefits directly to the people. And the best way to do that would be a guaranteed basic income for all. The next slide might surprise you. Is there a connection between basic income and liberalism? Maybe even neoliberalism? Well, liberalism, to put it in one sentence, is the concept of limited government, a state with little bureaucracy, free trade, and free people. And it's in this mindset that some liberals suggest, well, instead of having a welfare system that's not really efficient, that's not really transparent, we simply cut all social benefits and implement a basic income for all. Well, I would add, we cut all social benefits to the amount of the basic income, as there might still be special needs for some above the basic income. But what we then get is a system that's highly efficient in the way that everyone who really needs it really gets it. And we would have a system with much less bureaucracy, a system that would be much simpler and transparent in the way that it would be easier to understand. Well, another point here is, what do managers say to this? If I were a manager, I could easily say, oh, basic income sounds great. If there's a basic income, I don't need any minimum wages, I don't need any work regulations, I don't need any job protections, and I can just in a very flexible way hire and dismiss people the way I want. And when I dismiss someone, I'm not even the bad guy, because the people still have their basic income. Let me make one thing very clear. Basic income does not necessarily mean to abolish all other social benefits. But there's a certain point to that flexibility. The jobs of the future are more likely to be project-based than today. So groups of people come together for a certain period of time, work on a certain project, and when the project's done, they separate again. And a basic income could provide the necessary security for that kind of flexible working. Or to put it in other words, a basic income could be the response to a labor market that's becoming more and more flexible anyway. Let me make one last point here, especially when talking about neoliberalism and basic income. The amount of money is absolutely crucial. It is absolutely important that the basic income is high enough. If the basic income wasn't high enough, then it would just support the low-pay sector and put even more pressure on wages. And this is not what we want to achieve with basic income. In fact, there's a close link between basic income and emancipation. Well, emancipation here means the process of obtaining self-determination and personal freedom. And some people say, as long as there isn't at least a basic financial protection, you can at any time be forced for money to do things. So you just need a financial protection, for example, in form of a basic income, to really live your own life, to choose freely how to live your work life, your family life, your private life, maybe even your political life. And it's in that way we can understand freedom. Freedom isn't that you can do whatever you want. First and foremost, it's you don't have to do what you don't want to do. And so we can understand that slogan, free from work is free to work. When you don't have to work, then you are free to work. You are free to do the work you choose to do. And some people even hope that basic income might lead to more economic democracy and to more participation in decision-making. Let's talk about technology for a second. Is there a future for today's jobs? Ever since industrialization has started 200 years ago, people ask themselves, what's going to happen when our work is done by machines? And the response to that from established economics is, well, that's just structural change. So old jobs go away and new jobs are created. And for most of the time, this has been true. We've seen a massive change from an agricultural society towards an industrialized society. Some people even call what we have today a service society, as most jobs are already based on services and not on industrial production anymore. So it seems that we have to ask that question again. What's going to happen when our work is done by machine? Already today, we have factories with only a very small number of people, but with a lot of technology and robots and stuff. And in every major company, there's a department for research and development, and they only have one aim: to make things more productive, more efficient. And this usually means to take a machine or software instead of people. And every time when they make a new invention, something really strange happens. In one department, so in that department, the people are happy and proud of their new success. The managers come and congratulate on the new machine, the new software, whatever. But in all the other departments, people complain. People are angry and say, why do we have to go now? Why do we lose our jobs and our income? Well, what we need to understand is that this kind of problem is in fact a success story. I think it is a success story when automation, rationalization, and more technology take away the work that's been hard, dangerous, ineffective, or simply inconvenient. And what we see today is that as we create more intelligent software, more intelligent machines and robots, the speed of this whole process continues to increase, so that we ultimately have to ask one question: what's the future of our jobs and of our society when the smartest people we have do nothing but research how to replace human beings with machines? To round this up, I would like to introduce two persons to you. On the left-hand side, a farmer from the Middle Ages, which I would like to call a self-supplier. And on the right-hand side, also a farmer, but from nowadays, which I call the external supplier. Some people say the concept of a basic income is crazy because naturally everyone is responsible for his own life and so for his own income. And you work for your income, don't you? Well, let's have a closer look at this. The economy and labor market of today are highly specialized. So whenever someone's working today, he's not working for himself, not for his own needs, but for someone else's. Whatever job I have today, I always work for the interests of others. And this means, when I don't work for what I need, then I'm completely dependent on the work of others. I'm completely dependent on other people all the time. And this idea that I'm responsible for my own income, that I work for my own income, goes back to the self-supplier. For him, this was true. He really was working so he had an income. He really was working so that he had something to eat. And today it still seems like that because of the money, because you get paid for work. But in fact, even the farmer isn't a self-supplier anymore. Even for the farmer, this isn't true. He also sells his products and takes the money to buy something in the next job. And this is true for all of us. We are all external suppliers working for the interests of others. Let's make this visual for a second. Think of your income not in terms of money, but in terms what you actually buy for it, in terms what you actually buy and use. So imagine you put everything you buy in 1 month on a table. So all the food, the clothes, just everything you spend money for in 1 month. How would that table look like? You see, it has all been made by others for you. And that's your real income, the stuff you can actually really use. So maybe it's time to think about the connection between work and income in a new way. Let's come to a more practical aspect and talk about finances. Can we afford a basic income? I know we are talking about a lot of money here, and of course that needs calculations and implementation models done by economists, which, by the way, already exist. But nevertheless, we can already answer that question. Can we afford a basic income? We can answer it when we think about the purpose again, when we think about what we actually need it for, what we want it for. So instead of asking, can we afford a basic income, we could also ask, can we afford that everyone in our society has enough to eat, has a place to live, has access to medical care, and to a minimum participation in society? And when we think about it in those terms, I'm pretty sure we can afford that. But what are the costs of a basic income? Well, we need to understand one thing. A basic income will not lead to everyone suddenly having more money. We can only use the money that's already there. We're not a bank. And the costs are not as high as you might think, because at least in top and middle salaries, the basic income will become a part of today's income. And considering all the benefits we already have today and we could then cut, the more important question is, how much more does it cost than today? And to answer that question, we need to ask, well, who would be better off than today? I mean, who would directly, in terms of money, be better off than today? And that's easy to answer. A basic income will directly affect all those who have less than the basic income today. And in the end, it's that gap we have to close, to make sure that there's a lower bound saying nobody should have less than that. Fair enough, but where does the money come from? Well, like any other social benefit, a basic income can only be funded through taxation. And these are the options. There can be taxes on income, on consumption, on energy, on property, on financial transactions, and there are even more ideas. I think it's really worth discussing which taxes are reasonable and which aren't. And my personal hope is that we get a taxation system that is a lot simpler than what we have today, and that's more transparent. But this is a question that's not directly connected to basic income and can also be answered differently in different countries. One could as well just integrate it in the current system of taxation. But I think it's a good opportunity to think about taxation in general as well when talking about basic income. Let's say we wanted a basic income. How could we implement it? Well, the first question we have to ask is, do we want to implement it all at once or step by step, like with an amount increasing over the years? Or maybe we want to implement it group by group, for example, via pilot projects beginning in certain cities or regions. Or we could also start with a certain generation, saying everyone born in next year and later just grows up with the basic income. We could also start with the pensioners, implementing something like a minimum pension. And some people also suggest, well, if there's someone who really can't be blamed for being poor, then it's the children. So why not start with an unconditional child benefit for all children? What are the hopes connected to basic income? Let's ask that question. What would the basic income mean to, for example, single mothers and fathers, family members providing home care, the self-employed, or any other group of society? What would it mean to you? And for society as a whole, what would it mean for gender justice, freedom of ideas, self-determination, lifestyle choices for everyone? What do you think? What's your opinion? There's still so many open questions, and I think we should really start discussing them. So, for now, let me just finish with this quote from Victor Hugo. Nothing is stronger than an idea whose time has come. Thank you very much.